you're watching the English newscast on Future Television. I'm Lindy Tamim, and these are today's top stories. Future Movement leader Saad Hariri accuses Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah of falsification and deception regarding the Yemeni conflict. Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnouk says the situation in Rumiyeh is now back to normal following a riot protesting strict detention regulations. And the Lebanese army will receive its first shipment of French weapons on Monday, part of a $3 billion military aid package funded by Saudi Arabia. Future Movement leader and former Prime Minister Saad Hariri has accused Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah of falsification and deception regarding the Yemeni conflict, noting that Hezbollah's Yemen rhetoric is imported from Iran and does not serve Lebanon's interest. Hariri's comments appeared on Twitter just minutes after Nasrallah launched scathing tirades against Saudi Arabia over its Arab-backed airstrikes in Yemen. In a televised speech earlier on Friday, Nasrallah accused Saudi Arabia of being the source of Takfiri ideology in the world. He also criticized the late King Abdul Aziz Al Saud, the founder of the kingdom. But Hariri stressed that political escalation will not manage to distort the image, role or reputation of Saudi Arabia. And despite the escalating rhetoric, Hariri said his future movement will continue the dialogue with Hezbollah. 20 prison guards have been released overnight, hours after they had been taken hostage by Islamist inmates in Rumi prison during a riot protesting strict detention regulations. The release of the captive guards was reportedly secured after hours of fraught negotiations between security forces and Islamist inmates. Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnouk says the situation in Rumiyeh is now back to normal, but despite the minister's assurances, security sources expressed concern over the fraught situation in Block D, as they believe there is evidence of a gap in prison security. Another source inside the prison expressed his frustration with the situation since Friday's riots had severely damaged the newly rehabilitated Block D, allowing for very lax security in the facility. The riots come in response to the stricter regulations that the prison authorities have adopted to prevent the smuggling of drugs and weapons to inmates. The Lebanese army will receive its first shipment of French weapons on Monday, part of a $3 billion military aid package funded by Saudi Arabia to assist the poorly equipped military in its war against jihadi militants. Meanwhile, Lebanese Army Commander General Jean Ahwaji said the armed forces will not allow militants to infiltrate Lebanese border towns under any circumstances. A ceremony to mark the arrival of the shipment will take place at Rafiq Hariri International Airport early on Monday. Defense Minister Samir Muqbil, his French counterpart Jean-Yves Le Drian, General Jean Ahwaji and Saudi Ambassador Ali Awad Asiri will attend the ceremony. Lebanon is now hosting over 1 million Syrian refugees. The economic strain on the country exists alongside the challenges the refugees face to meet their basic needs. The High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres, and the UN Secretary General Humanitarian Envoy, Dr. Abdullah al-Matouk, traveled to Debane to see firsthand the challenges the refugees face.
In southern Lebanon, nestled between a main highway and a banana farm, sits the informal settlement of Debane. 156 Syrian refugees, 31 families. Mohammed came with his wife and 7 children at the beginning of the conflict in Syria.
متشائمين يعني شو واحد أنا صار لي 4 سنوات هون يعني لا شفت بيتي لا شفت أهلي لا شفت حدا.
The High Commissioner for Refugees, Antonio Guterres, and the UN Secretary General Humanitarian Envoy, Dr. Abdullah al-Matouk, traveled to Debane to see firsthand the challenges the refugees face. UNHCR and partners subsidize primary health care. It also covers 75% of emergency and obstetrics care. 106,000 refugee students are enrolled in public schools with UNHCR and UNICEF support. 300,000 are not in public schools. At the recently held Kuwait Donor Conference, $3.8 billion was pledged to help the refugees in the region.
حسوا في يعني ما يعانيه اخواننا اللاجئين سواء في لبنان او في الاردن او في اي بقاع الأرض من مأساة، فبالتالي يعني تعهدوا في هذه المبالغ الكبيرة اللي يساعدوا إخواننا اللاجئين سواء في الداخل أو في الخارج.
So we need massive solidarity from the international community. Solidarity with the Syrian refugees, but solidarity with the Lebanese people and the Lebanese government and the other neighboring countries.
In a few weeks, Mohammed's daughter-in-law will give birth to his first grandchild, but he sees the future as being grim.
هلا مثلا اولاد هذول الجيل، هذا الجيل الجديد التعليم يعني مو هالتعليم هون، يعني تغير عليهم مناهج التعليم كلياتها، تدمر الجيل كامل. شو يظل المستقبل يعني تعال يمكن هذا الولد هذا اذا ظل هالمستمر، ابن هذه اللي جاي بعد 10 15 يوم بيطلع امي، هذا صاروا جيل اميين، هذول صاروا اميين ما عندهم.
The conflict is now in its 5th year. The money pledged will allow humanitarian agencies like UNHCR to meet the basic needs of the refugees and host countries. But much more is needed.
And coming up next, a replica of the French Navy frigate Ariane sets sail for the United States. More details after the break. Welcome back. At least 27 people have been killed in the Yemeni city of Taiz in clashes between loyalist forces and rebels, as well as Saudi-led coalition air raids. Residents say the city in southwest Yemen was rocked by explosions and gunfire overnight as the coalition-backed forces of President Abd Rabbu Mansour Hadi battled pro-Iranian Houthi rebels. On Friday, coalition warplanes carried out heavy airstrikes on a presidential palace in Taiz, Yemen's third largest city, and of positions held by special forces units loyal to former President Ali Abdullah Saleh, who was sided with the Houthis. Overnight clashes were also reported in districts of Aden, while pro-Hadi forces held off rebels battling for the past week for control of Aden's refinery, some 15 kilometers west of the port city. Saudi Arabia has announced $274 million in humanitarian aid for Yemen. The pledge, which the official SPA news agency said was ordered by King Salman bin Abdulaziz Al Saud, followed a UN appeal to provide emergency assistance to the millions affected by the conflict. The World Health Organization, in a new toll, says 767 people have died in Yemen's war since March 19th, and more than 2,900 have been wounded, mainly civilians. The UN says thousands of families have fled their homes due to the war, which has also killed 6 Saudi security officers in border skirmishes. Australian Foreign Minister Julie Bishop has met Iranian President Hassan Rouhani during her visit to Tehran. Bishop earlier met with Foreign Minister Mohammad Javad Zarif, with whom she discussed the threat posed by Islamic State militants in Iraq and Syria. The two countries have decided to hold talks on the issue of Iranian asylum seekers not deemed refugees by Australia. Bishop's visit to Iran comes after Tehran and Western nations agreed on a framework nuclear agreement ahead of a final deal aimed at curbing Iran's nuclear program in exchange for relief from sanctions. And moving on to Europe, Ukraine wants the International Criminal Court to investigate all alleged war crimes in Crimea and eastern Ukraine, where it has been fighting pro-Russian rebels. Ukraine has already given the global court the authority to investigate crimes on its territory since November of 2013.
It's everything which is under mandate, including crimes against humanity. If you see a number of tragic events, for example, shelling on Mariupol, killed in seconds more than 30 people and having more than 100 people wounded, a number of other such shellings. You know, if you have a military hostility, it's one situation. If you deliberately, and I have to stress it, deliberately shell on cities, killing civilians, it's a completely different situation. And we have to engage the ICC in working on these cases. I don't consider the ICG and the ICC as the tracks we should exclude each other. I believe in different cases they would rather fit together and match different legal tracks.
Scenes of looted stores are greeting Johannesburg residents in South Africa as police assist foreign nationals to safety in Alexandra, north of Johannesburg. Overnight, looting and road blockages by anti-immigrant protesters were reported in Alexandra, Malvern, Thokoza and Cleveland. Late on Friday, a group of protesters barricaded portions of the M2 highway with rocks and refuse, and police were forced to fire rubber bullets to disperse the crowd. More than 30 people were arrested on Friday night in the Cleveland and Thokoza policing area, while another 5 were arrested in Alexandra. In the port city of Durban, meanwhile, no new incidents of violence against foreigners have been reported. Police, however, established that a 6th person had been confirmed dead in the violence that has plagued the city for over 2 weeks. At least 33 people have been killed and more than 100 injured in a series of attacks in Jalalabad city in Afghanistan. The first attack reportedly occurred early this morning after a suicide bomber detonated his explosives near the gate of the new Kabul bank branch. Just hours after the first attack, another explosion happened near the Da Afghanistan bank branch, just 60 meters away from the first attack. A third attack occurred outside a shrine, but no one was injured. The Islamic State group has claimed responsibility for the attacks. A replica of the French Navy frigate Hermione that brought General Lafayette to America to rally rebels fighting Britain in the U.S. War of Independence will set sail for the United States again 235 years after the original crossing. The new replica took a painstaking 17 years to construct, mobilizing hundreds of craftspeople from around the world. French President François Hollande is expected to be on hand to wish the ship and crew Godspeed on the journey from France's Aix Island to the U.S. East Coast, a trip exciting sailing and history fans on both sides of the Atlantic. Some 80 crew members will sail the 3-masted ship along the route to Boston, made by French General Gilbert Dumoutier, known as the Marquis de Lafayette, to bolster revolutionaries fighting for an independent United States. The crew plans to make landfall on June 5 in Yorktown in Virginia, where U.S. troops led by George Washington and French soldiers accompanied by General Lafayette scored a decisive victory over the British in 1781. The frigate is scheduled to make more than 10 stops in the United States as it sails up to the East Coast, including in Baltimore, Philadelphia, and Boston, and also New York, right on time for the July 4 independence celebrations. Surveillance video from inside a Philadelphia subway station shows the dramatic rescue of a man after he loses his balance and falls off the platform onto the tracks. In the surveillance video, as you will see, 28-year-old Charles Collins is seen jumping into the tracks to save the man, identified as Alfred McNamee. Other passengers in the subway station also immediately rushed to action, first pulling McNamee and then Collins back onto the safety of the platform. McNamee was taken to the hospital with various broken bone injuries, whereas Collins only suffered a minor knee injury. The transit agency commended the fast-thinking passengers, but cautioned that someone could have been seriously hurt. The agency says passengers should have been notified and should have notified the cashier, used the emergency call box when McNamee fell instead of trying to rescue him. This marks the end of our bulletin for today. Now for a reminder of our top stories. Future movement leader Saad Hariri accuses Hezbollah chief Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah of falsification and deception regarding the Yemeni conflict. Interior Minister Nuhad al-Mashnouk says the situation in Rumi is now back to normal following a riot protesting strict detention regulations. And the Lebanese army will receive its first shipment of French weapons on Monday, part of a $3 billion military aid package funded by Saudi Arabia. Those were the news trending on our channel for today. Yumna Naufal will be here tomorrow with more updates. Make sure you tune in.